Good afternoon to you all. My name is Jerry Power, and I am the National Head of Sales for Emergence, and I will be your host for today's webinar. This webinar series is an ongoing feature of our education initiative to build the cyber knowledge of our broker partners and their clients. Today is a big day for Emergence, as you are part of one of the biggest webinars we've ever done in this quarterly webinar series, which has been going since 2017. Over 1,600 brokers and clients have registered for today's webinar, which gives you an insight into how many of you are interested in building your knowledge on cyber. Today, we're delighted to have two very experienced and knowledgeable forensic investigators joining us. Firstly, we have Darren Hopkins of McGrath Nicol, Cyber and Forensic Technology Division, who's going to share with you his insights into what the cyber threat landscape looks like as we move into 2021. I will walk you through insights from the latest report into the Notifiable Data Breaches Scheme, which came out recently. Shane Bell, also from McGrath Nicol's Cyber and Forensic Technology Division, will provide practical tips and strategies on how businesses can protect themselves from the ever-increasing cyber threat landscape. And finally, I will give you an update on what Emergence have been up to and how we support brokers. As usual, there will also be opportunities for you to ask questions. Before we start, let's square off some housekeeping matters. I'm pleased to advise all attendees will be entitled to 1 CPD point for joining today's webinar. You can post questions at any time during the webinar. Our CEO, Troy, will reply to as many of them during the webinar as possible, and we'll have 10 minutes at the end to discuss a few more interesting questions. Let's hope Troy can lift his game today and answer as many of those as possible. And as a thank you to all of you for joining the webinar today, we're giving away 5 $50 gift cards. The good news for you is you are all automatically in the draw. So we'll provide you with more details on that later. Cyber attacks are one of the greatest risks facing business today from a likelihood and an impact perspective. To help us understand what the cyber threat landscape looks like and helps us focus on what the real cyber risk issues are from an Australian perspective, we're delighted to have one of our partner forensic investigators joining us today. McGrath Nicol are one of our panel partners in our incident response team. From McGrath Nicol, we've got Darren Hopkins. Darren specializes in advising businesses on both proactive and reactive uses of technology in the areas of cybersecurity, privacy, digital forensics, and technology-led investigations. Darren is a highly respected, qualified investigator and forensic technology expert with more than 20 years specialist forensic experience. He works regularly with boards, executives, and senior business leaders in organizations of every size to consider and set technology strategies for cyber, privacy, data protection, and information risk management. His extensive experience spans across a wide range of industries. He also regularly applies his digital forensic and investigative expertise to help resolve matters ranging from large-scale data breaches or theft through to employee misconduct or intellectual property matters. Over to you, Darren.
Thanks, Jerry. And I think we've just used most of our time up on my bio, which is something I need to adjust. In coming into this session today, we've spent some time going back and having a look at what the last 12 months has actually meant for us as a business responding to these attacks. And we wanted to bring some of those insights together so we can predict, I guess, what we will see going forward. And funny enough, we also have had a look at what January and the start of February looks like. And it's probably been one of our busiest seasons for new cyber attacks. So we want to bring that together as well. If we were to consolidate and have a think about what it is the threat landscape currently looks like, it's still 3 things that haven't changed. We are still seeing business email compromises where where somebody loses access to a mailbox, generally because somebody in the business makes a mistake or clicks on a link or does something without the knowledge that it's an attacker there trying to coerce them into doing that, and then that mailbox is then used to generally perpetrate a fraud. And I know at the moment there's a couple of these matters that we're sort of having a look at as well. The other things that we are absolutely seeing a big uptick in ransomware, and you've probably all seen in the press that there are still instances of these ransomware events making the press, but more so there's evolution to ransomware moving into data theft, and we'll have a quick talk about that as well. And this evolution of what we're seeing goes, I guess, to the point that the threat landscape, and we talk about attackers or hackers or whatever you want to call them, are effectively people whose business is to attack us and make money through a cyber attack, and that's what we are. So we've got some points we'll run through if we can jump to that next point. So I often get asked, what are there certain businesses that are more susceptible or being attacked more? Is it small, medium, SMEs, or larger enterprise? There isn't actually any common size of business that's susceptible to an attack. And I went back and had a look at our last 100 breaches that we had to investigate, and it's a pretty even mix. What we do see is, though, that the smaller SMEs who haven't got the budgets to invest in technology or systems are more likely to, in the event of an attack, fall victim. But we're absolutely seeing the larger businesses who should and can afford better protections. When they do fail, it's of a much larger scale. And interestingly, we're actually seeing the attackers are researching us as they go and adjusting their strategies when they work out who they've actually just found. And one of the examples of that was in one of our analysis we did of a breach. I was watching an attacker use the web browser of the computer he had taken over, and he went to a website called Zoom Info, which you may be familiar with, and actually typed in the name of the business that they had just logged into server and started reading the details of this business. How big is the business? How many employees? What's its annual turnover? And then started doing things for, do they have an annual return? This is an example of the attacker trying to work out who they've got, the size of their business, and then tailoring the attack to that. We'll jump to that next one. So, as I mentioned, the enterprise businesses, when they fail, tend to fail in a way that causes much more disruption, and disruption is one of the actual attacks that we are seeing becoming more and more common. So rather than what we used to see in the past, someone gets some malware onto your computer, or someone takes over your email account and potentially sends out emails that are malicious or tries to coerce somebody to doing something, the attackers realize that if they can stop your business from operating, if they can disrupt you, then there is a chance that you're going to want to stop that. And that sort of falls into one of these areas of ransomware that we're seeing. If we look at the next point, which is that the ransoms are getting larger. Now, we're seeing two types of ransoms play out, and I'll talk about that when we get to a slide going forward. Traditionally, ransomware, when it first started, was, can I lock your computer and take away your files and make it so the only way you get them back is to pay me money? That was the effectively what they were trying to do. The last 2 or 3 years, businesses have been getting better at adjusting to what risk there is there. And what they have started to do is have better backup systems. They're able to recover from these attacks. So the disruption isn't necessarily the major issue, but when it is, we are seeing the ransoms are going up. We've actually seen a client have to facilitate a $7 million payment in Monero, which is a type of Bitcoin or similar to a Bitcoin, to an overseas entity to get their business back up and running. Okay, next slide. This is an interesting one, and this is something that we're seeing on more than, I would say, half of the attacks. Sometimes you're not necessarily to blame as a business. Your actual supply chain and the people that work with your business may be the reason that you've actually had a failing. There's a matter at the moment I've been talking to the Emergence team on, where actually somebody else has been fallen victim to a business email compromise, and then they've used that email account to facilitate an invoice, a very large invoice getting paid. We have also done some jobs where we've seen the managed service provider, so your IT provider who's supposed to look after your systems, they have fallen victim, and then they've used the IT provider to get into our client systems. And when your IT provider is lost, there's very little you can do to actually deal with that. We have a look at that last point. And one thing that is absolutely true here is that the attackers are continually updating and changing the way they go about their business. And if you have a look at what we've seen in the last 12 months is that the types of scams and the spam and the things that we're seeing immediately adjusted to COVID. And we were seeing that people were falling victim to different attacks because they took a topical event and misused it. And these attackers will always look for an approach to either exploit a vulnerable person or to exploit something that is something we're keen to find out to sort of get through that next part. The next slide we'll have a look at. I wanted to focus a little bit on ransomware, mainly because in the last 6 months, I would say that 80% of the large scale breaches we've done have been here and have had the most damage to clients that we've supported. On this, hopefully no one ever have to see one of these things in real life. It's a ransomware note that would be left in many, many places if you fall victim to a ransomware. There will be your desktop wallpaper get changed to a ransom note. Every folder has a little note on it called with a ransom note. And you actually have no choice but to know that this has occurred. We're also seeing emails getting sent at the same time. What people don't see though is the thing on the right hand side. The large scale attacks of ransomware aren't being done by somebody sitting in a room by themselves who's very good at IT. Generally what we're seeing is organized crime are responsible for most of the large scale ransomware groups that are out there attacking us. And if we had a look at locations, and I've got a pin board in our office where we actually pin the various countries that have attacked somebody. At the moment, it's only North Korea that we actually haven't pinned, and I'm desperate to get that one at some point. But this year, in the last 6 months, we've actually had a state-sponsored attack, which we trace back to China. We've had plenty of attacks coming out of Russia, the Ukraine, Eastern Bloc countries, Africa. We see these things coming from everywhere. What's actually quite interesting though is that these groups are very organized. They have their own web pages. They're not on the internet though, they're on the dark net. And if you know where to go, you can go to their web page. Now, the Happy blog, which is what I've got there, is the web page for one of the largest groups out there who does ransomware called Revel. They have their own web page. You can visit it, and most of the press in the world are watching this web page every day, because if you don't pay a ransom, this is where they out you to the world of what they've taken and how they're going to actually misuse and sell your data. And this is an example of them then going about selling your information if they've stolen it, to try and make some money in the event that you didn't pay a ransom. So not paying a ransom doesn't mean that they won't be successful in some way. And I guess that sort of goes to the pivot we've seen for these attacks. If we have a look at our next slide, there's an evolution that's occurring, and it's been happening for a good 12 months. On the right-hand side, you'll see we've got the 3 E's. This is something we've sort of termed based on what we're seeing. So in the past, ransomware was about, can I lock up your computer? And when I lock up your computer, hopefully you'll pay me a ransom to get your data back. What we're now seeing is the first thing the attackers will do is exfiltrate, so steal your data. And they'll do that in a number of different ways. So they'll want to be as quiet as they can and copy as much information as they can before they do anything. The next thing they'll do is encrypt all your data, which is the traditional disrupt your business, lock all of your files up so you can't get them. And when they're doing that, they will absolutely try and delete all your backups and make it as hard as it is for you to recover. And then the last thing they do is they'll extort you. Now, the extortion is absolutely something that we are seeing more and more of. I've had an instance where a CEO of the business was the first to find out about the ransomware because the attacker sent the CEO an email, and in that email was a note from the attacker, and it basically said, look, this is just business. We've managed to encrypt all your servers, your files. We've actually copied most of your data, and they included screenshots of everything that they had taken. In the note that the attacker left that was sent to the CEO, they said, well, you probably won't believe us, so ask to see any folder that you want, and we'll send you a screenshot of that to prove that we've copied your data. And attached to this email is a copy of your insurance policy. And we know you're insured for this. So as a result, it's not really going to cost you money, so you might as well pay us. Now, this is the exchange that an attacker had with the CEO of an entity. And during that particular event, it was interesting because we had a number of board meetings where we were actually having to sit down there and talk about, well, are we going to be making payments? Because one of the things in that note that was really strange was a comment that the attacker made where they said, look, this is just business. They said, all we're asking you to do is pay us some money to minimize the amount of harm we're going to cause to your people and to your clients. That's it. This is the world we're living in now, where the exchanges are very familiar and common. We are in some cases having to deal with these attackers, and they do sort of act and deal with us as if they're just another business exchange. Hacking teams are now selling their services as a service. So they're businesses that support smaller hacking teams, and they have education awareness sessions. They train people. I've even seen one instance in a forum where hackers were trying to encourage people on how to be more successful with a business email compromise. What they actually had done is one African group was struggling to be successful with their scam emails. And someone suggested, well, what you need to do is you need to make a phone call, send the email, and then ring them up. And if you ring them up and tell them that they should expect an invoice to be paid, they're more likely to pay it. And this was a coaching session from 2 attackers on how to do these things. And the person came back and said, no, I couldn't call them up. I'm attacking this particular country. I don't even speak their language very well. And the response was, look, no, here's some links to some voice actors that we've used in the past. So if you pay these people, they'll make the phone call for you, say whatever you want, and you can choose whatever language you want them to be. So if it's an Australian, they'll have an Australian accent. If it's British, they'll have a British accent. And this is the type of things that we as practitioners and businesses are having to actually counter. We have a look at our next slide. So what should we expect, and what changes are actually coming through here? And interestingly enough, I'm talking about what we're seeing. So we're seeing doom and gloom, and people being breached, and people paying ransoms, and businesses being disrupted. In December, we started helping a manufacturing client who was suffering about $100,000 a day disruption cost. That's what the cost of this cyber attack was to them. They had connected their systems all the way through to China for manufacturing, and when the attack came, everything stopped and they could do nothing. The country has responded, and our government has responded to these risks. And you may have seen last year, there's a new cybersecurity strategy that the country has that has been put out there to help businesses recover. Our regulators are often talking to us about what we should do. If you're a business that is regulated by APRA, there's already a standard out there, CPS 234 it's called, which tells businesses who are regulated by APRA what they should do. ASIC at the moment is also looking to reinforce how important cybersecurity is to their business, and we expect in the near future that ASIC as a regulator will start to mandate some more information. And any business that is tied up in the supply chain of critical infrastructure should expect some legislation changes this year that will force us all to do things better. And I guess, we saw the first of these legislation changes with the Notifiable data breach regime, where the Privacy Commissioner made it quite clear that we have to respond appropriately. But what we'll see next is that business will actually have to do something about reducing the risk of these things happening. That's probably a good segue to go on to Jerry.
Thanks, Darren. Very much appreciated for that. It gives you an insight as to what's happening out there in the wild and the sort of attacks that are actually happening. So Darren mentioned the Notifiable Data Breaches Scheme. So that scheme has been operating since 2018. So before I go on, I always like looking at this picture because that's what I looked like before COVID arrived. So I wouldn't dare put today's picture up for you. Shouldn't be damaging people like that. But let's talk about the more important things. The Notifiable Data Breaches Scheme has been in operation since 2018. If there is unauthorized access of personal information or personal information is lost, then this could be classified as an eligible data breach under the NDB scheme, and as such may need to be reported to the Office of the Australian Information Commissioner, known as the OAIC. Recently, the Privacy Commissioner released their latest report into the scheme, which gives us a full year's insight into the NDB scheme in 2020. The report highlighted what Emergence expected, which was a continued increase in data breaches being notified to the Commissioner. The latest half-yearly report shows us there was 539 data breaches notified in just the last 6 months, up 5% from the previous half-year period. When you take 2020 as a whole, there was 1,051 data breaches in total. The two key drivers of data breaches continue to be human error and criminal attacks. Malicious breaches such as phishing, malware, or brute force attacks are responsible for 58% of the data breaches. Looking at the data breaches caused by malicious or criminal attacks, social engineering techniques such as phishing, waterhole attacks, vishing, and pretexting are still trending to deceive people into gaining access to IT systems. But the area that is of most concern to me is the human error stats. As humans, we have this great skill of finding new ways to make mistakes. The latest report shows us that employee mistakes are responsible for 38% of data breaches, which is an increase of 18% from the January to June 2020 period. The thing that frustrates me about this stat is that it is an issue that is within our control as businesses. If businesses have proper policies and procedures in place through a risk management process, which Shane will talk about later, a significant amount of these data breaches could be prevented. As you can see, from the 18% increase, businesses are not getting the message, so that there's great opportunity for you to add value to your clients. You as brokers have an important role to play in pushing this risk management education piece. By improving their risk management policies and procedures, businesses can improve their security posture and in return, potentially reduce their cyber insurance premiums. Employers need to understand that when the security controls fail to stop an attack, such as a phishing campaign, it is the employees who are the last line of defense. It is the staff who need to be educated to identify a dodgy email or a suspicious invoice. The top 5 industries for human error breaches are on your screen, or for the industries. The healthcare industry continues to be the worst offender. That's been the case in every NDB report since 2018, accounting for 25% of all data breaches, with the financial services industry, lawyers and accountants consistently being in the top 5. The healthcare industry continues to be the worst offender, with human error breaches representing 57% of all data breaches in the sector, which is 50% greater than the Australian average. These data breaches emphasize the need for staff training to increase awareness of cyber risks and to take the necessary precautions. The financial services sector tends to have a larger amount of malicious attacks, probably due to the financial reward motivation. So to put these industry stats in context, Here we have the claims experience by industry in the Emergence cyber portfolio. Our worst performing sector is in fact the professional services sector, which includes accountants, lawyers, real estate, and the like. Healthcare is the second worst performer in the portfolio. So you can see that there's some correlation between the Emergence claims experience and what the NDB stats are showing. So what information has been stolen? Contact information such as name, address, and emails were compromised in 91% of the cases. Identity information such as passport numbers, driver's license, and Medicare details were exposed in 45% of data breaches. 40% of data breaches included stolen bank accounts and credit card details. Looking at the data breaches caused by malicious or criminal attacks, these were responsible for 58% of all data breaches, and cyber incidents were responsible for 68% of these. Interestingly, social engineering, which is a hot topic in the Australian cyber and crime markets, were responsible for 11% of malicious attacks, which is over double what it was in 2019. This gives you some insight into why cyber and ML insurers are increasing their underwriting focus in the social engineering area. The most common method of gaining access to business systems was by email-based phishing. This confirms that email-based vulnerability is one of the greatest risks to information security facing business today. And of course, it is the employees who are clicking on the emails. That's why Emergence continue to push the message that employee security awareness training is a critical element in defending the business from attack. Under the NDB scheme, businesses are required to take reasonable steps to ensure data breaches can be detected in a timely manner. It is pleasing to see that in 78% of situations, businesses notified the OAIC of the incident within 30 days of it taking place. The time taken to identify a data breach varied significantly depending on the source of the data breach. For human error breaches, 86% of entities identified the incident within 30 days of it occurring, which is good. So as you can see, the NDB scheme is having a material impact on the disclosure of data breaches, and the number of data breaches continues to rise at a slower rate, even though it is at a slower rate. Healthcare continues to be the problem child, with the financial services industry still high on the attraction list for criminals. As a trusted advisor to your clients, please take the opportunity to emphasize the importance of employee education to be an effective last line of defense. It is obvious that as awareness of the NDB scheme continues and data breaches continue being topical news on mainstream media and in social media, the need to manage data breaches becomes more critical to the reputation and the survival of business. From a broker's perspective, look at the industries that your clients are operating in and consider whether you need to have a cyber conversation with them. And remember, employees are the weakest link. So let's move on and talk about how businesses can protect themselves. Earlier, Darren gave us an insight as to what is happening from a threat perspective. I have walked you through the sorts of data breaches that are occurring and what industries are most at risk. Now let's move on and focus how the business can make themselves more cyber resilient. Today, we're joined by another McGrath-Nicol forensic expert in Shane Bell. Shane has 20 years experience managing technology and information risk in business, with a particular focus on cybersecurity, digital forensic incident response, privacy breaches, data and information governance. With a background in active military service, Shane is highly trained in management and leadership in stressful and crisis situations such as cyber breaches. He works with boards, executive teams, and business leaders, helping them proactively and reactively manage technology and information security risks in their businesses. Over to you, Shane.
Thanks, Jerry. Hi, everyone. Tough act to follow. Oh, let's not dwell too long on that slide. I too don't look like my photo. I can attest to the fact that Jerry looks nothing like his photo because I'm in the same room as Jerry. So Darren's done his job and he's shown you what it's like inside a breach and an incident and given you some insights into ransomware, which even to me, having seen a lot of that was very insightful. Those techniques change all the time and can be pretty confronting, I must admit. And Jerry's gone through some things there around the NDB scheme, which are always some good insights that come out from the OAIC. And so my job is to let you know that the sky isn't falling down and there's some things that we can do here to help protect ourselves and aim for something that we commonly call within the industry as resilience. This is my first slide, and depending on how you're looking at this when you're consuming the webinar, this is one worthy of looking at the screen for if you're just listening in. The first thing that we can do is elevate the cyber conversation. I've grown up in IT security and in fact a niche industry within IT security and digital forensics and incident response. And I can tell you that it was a long time in my career before we were allowed to talk to people that had influence and made decisions within an organization. It's not that we didn't want to, potentially it was that we couldn't because we were talking too much about the tech and not enough about the business and the risk. And that's something that we've learned over time. But pleasingly, cyber's allowed to sit at the big table now, which is where it needs to be, given some of the things that you've just heard about how serious an impact this issue can have on organisations of all shapes and sizes. So once you're at the big table, you need to find the right person, and that's what this is about. There's plenty of people that talk about cyber, and there's pleasingly some people in the industry that actually can do cyber and security, and that's what you want. There's a lot of hype around cybersecurity, as I'm sure you'd all be aware. You read it out in the newspaper every other day. On the news, there's all sorts of cyber commentators. There's a lot in the press. And that doesn't mean that everybody knows how to solve this problem in an organization. You need to find the right person that's passionate and has the ability to communicate and equally has the ability to operate a program that aims for resilience. We say, and we've been saying for a long time, and I agree with this statement, that cybersecurity is not just an IT problem. I completely agree with that. Having said that, it needs an IT skill set in order to solve the problem. We can't pretend that cybersecurity is not technical in some part, and so it's about finding the balance between those people that can that are passionate about it, that can do it, and that can communicate it, that are looking to take accountability and responsibility, and that you can afford, because there's some pretty expensive cybersecurity people out there as well. This is a busy slide, and I apologise for that slightly, but this is about building resilience. Like anything, enterprise risk management related, you need a framework, and cybersecurity is no different. There isn't one set framework in Australia for businesses to aim for resilience, although there are some guides that are fairly heavily suggested by the regulators and by government, and this is one of them. This is NIST. This is the framework that a lot of organisations use, critical infrastructure, big banks all the way down, and it's a really good framework. There's a couple of different aspects to this framework that I use when I'm talking to clients about how to build resilience. Firstly, it covers pretty much all spectrums of their organisation. So if you look from the left of the slide, we're talking about, governance, and it sort of pushes its way down to being able to respond and recover to issues. I call the two ends of this resilience framework the tickets to ride. So if you don't have a governance structure and you can't solve a crisis, then you're probably not going to get on the ride at all. It's going to be very difficult. The middle bit, which is very operational, at times technical, but needs to be translated more broadly to the business, and it's a trade-off, and you walk a line between proactive and reactive. That's where a lot of the money is spent within cybersecurity. That's how you stay on the ride. You need to do that well. You need to evolve it. You need to continue to invest in it. That's where you need to resource it with internal people, with consultants, and external capabilities. It's where you might buy technology. It's ordinarily where you sign up some of your biggest expenditure in cybersecurity, particularly in the detection capabilities. What we're talking about is managed security service providers. You may have heard of SOCs, security operations centers, a SIEM, which is a security incident and event management. We're full of acronyms in cybersecurity. They're expensive acronyms, but they're really important acronyms as well. And they sort of sit within that middle area. So when you're out talking to your clients about resilience and building resilience, that's what they should be aiming for. The first question that everybody has is, how do I come up with a view on how resilient I am, and then build an ongoing program towards resilience? And the answer is you need a framework, and the NIST framework's a pretty good one. There's also this thing in Australia called the ACSC, or the ASD Essential 8, and that's what I've got up on screen here. I won't go into all of the details here, but what I can say to you is that these are what I call the basics. These are the things that you can do that prevent, even with modern day iterations of cyber attacks, as Darren's sort of run you through with some of the ransomware. These will prevent, the stats vary depending on who you get at the ACSC about how much they want to put their reputation on the line. Anywhere between 80, I've heard as much as 95% prevention of the most common issues that are reported to the ACSC. The current head of ASIO, the previous head of the ASD, Mike Burgess, who also dropped out of the ASD and was the CISO at Telstra for a while, and a very significant figure within the realm of cybersecurity. When he made his first public speech as the head of the ASD, he said a couple of things in that speech that sort of stuck with me. The first one is he said, "Hi there, Mike Burgess, ASD, long-time listener, first-time caller." And so that's an interesting thing, because he's in the intelligence space, and a lot of the time they sit behind what we're doing and you don't hear much from them, but that's changing, hence the reason for things like the Essential 8. And he also said that of the incidents that are reported to the ASD or the ACSC by businesses in Australia, the 95% of those issues were known problems with known solutions, and they just hadn't been executed. And the Essential 8 are what get you there. And so as, again, you're talking to your clients about building resilience, the questions will be, what's resilience? How do I build resilience? And we've covered off those two areas. And the last bit is, where's a good place to start? And the ASD Essential 8, or the ACSC Essential 8, is a really good place to start. It doesn't solve all of the problems. It's quite tactical in its approach, arguably a bit narrow, but it's a good place to start in order to get the ball rolling and build into a bigger, more holistic program. How can you protect yourselves? This is a question that gets asked quite a lot by my clients. I'm assuming to you by your clients as well. There's some questions here that I use as a bit of a guide, and feel free to pick from those. Awesome points and questions of thought. This all pivots around information. Darren's mentioned that there's marketplaces on the dark net. There's places where you can go to buy this stuff. There's places where the crooks go to sell this stuff or extort you so that they don't release it. It all pivots around information and data. I heard it said the other day that data is the new superpower, and that's it in a number of different ways. Obviously, these other buzz terms like cyber, big data, and I think we've graduated beyond data warehouses. Now we might be on like data oceans or data something else. I'm not sure what the official terminology is, but data is king, right? Cash isn't king anymore. Data is king, and then it can be monetized. You want to be looking at conducting regular risk assessments. That's a key. A lot of people set and forget on a strategy. Set and forget doesn't get you there in this game. Look at the recent Acelion breach that's being publicised in Australia. It's an old piece of technology. It had a vulnerability. It was patched in December. People didn't apply the patch, and lo and behold, they've got an issue. Set and forget doesn't get you there. It needs to be updated regularly. Understand criticality and regularly test your backups. We've been saying that in IT for, decades. Backups are so critical and just as important in the realm of cybersecurity. Classifying information and assets is really hard. I acknowledge it's really hard to do, particularly in older businesses that have maybe come together through acquisition and growth over time. It's hard to classify information, but at least understand what your most important information is. An ex-colleague that I worked with for a long period of time that decided to cross from the dark side of consulting and become a CISO at a publicly listed company in Australia. The first question he asked that organisation on his day one was, what is our most important information and where is it? And it took him 6 months to get an answer. So we've come a long way there since then, I think, but that's to give you the insights as to how you build layers of protection around something that's not tangible in a cybersecurity world, and some of the challenges that you're dealing with there. 5 I like, and that's testing. Jerry mentioned that I've grown up in the military, and I did. I joined when I was 17 years old, and I navigated warships for a living. And I can tell you that I was never allowed to leave the wharf in Sydney to go anywhere if I didn't have a plan, and I hadn't tested the plan, and I hadn't stress tested the plan, and I hadn't contemplated what might go wrong along the way. You're just not allowed to take an asset like that off the wharf without doing that level of testing. Yet we operate businesses in Australia that are worth more than warships, and we don't even test what can go wrong. And I'm not saying that it needs to be like the military. I'll acknowledge that the military has its own cultural issues. But what I'm saying to you is that it's what we do for our high value assets. So why are our businesses any different? There's a few others on there around some monitoring and some logging. All of that's really important to cybersecurity people. Oversight of third parties, that's become really topical. I received a questionnaire from a client 2 weeks ago in order to be able to be part of their digital supply chain. That questionnaire had 1,127 questions for me to answer on information security. This is where we're getting to in terms of seeking some level of assurance around capability in digital supply chains, particularly people that have access to sensitive information. And awareness and training programs. Jerry mentioned it. I agree with it. Invest in the human element. I disagree slightly with Jerry in that I don't think humans are the weakest link. I just think they're the resource that we haven't yet tapped the full potential of. And if you take the time, they will be your front line and get you a lot of the way there. And also, and a good segue, I think, into Jerry is you should also look at your insurance options, right? When I was saying to Troy when we first got together today, the insurance market for cybersecurity has evolved a lot in a short period of time. And it used to be, and I'm sure there's stats around this, and maybe even Jerry's got some here, but it used to be that cyber insurance wasn't taken up very regularly or commonly by businesses in Australia. They didn't see the need. But now I can tell you, and Darren can probably attest to as well, that pretty much on every single incident that we're working, there's an insurance part or component to that. It's rare now that we get out there and we don't see cyber insurance. And of the 1,127 questions that I had to fill out, I can tell you that a whole section was on cyber insurance. So if that doesn't convince you, then I don't know what will. I don't think I've got any more slides there, Jerry. Back to you.
Thank you, Shane, for your personal feedback. We're very fortunate that your voice is sweeter than your picture. So, but you definitely had some tangible ways in which businesses can improve their security posture and prevent data breaches or cyber events. Shane's comments on Essential 8 are worth sharing with your clients because it's a good model to improve the resilience of the organization. So at Emergence, sorry, my apologies, I've got ahead of myself. Wouldn't be the first time. So at Emergence, we're always looking at how we can do things better and how we can support the people that we deal with, which is just brokers. So we try and do that in a number of ways. Firstly, from a coverage perspective, every year we look at the global cyber threat landscape to see how things are changing and how we need to adjust the Emergence offering to you and your clients. So we are the only cyber underwriter in the market that releases a new cyber wording every year. Last year, we went one step further and released 2 wordings, an updated commercial wording and the first ever personal cyber policy in Australia. We're also investing heavily in technology to allow us to develop the solutions we want to provide you and your clients. Secondly, education and support. We also invest heavily in providing education and support to brokers and clients in a number of ways, such as webinars like these, client presentations, broker education sessions, access to specialist underwriters and decision makers, thought leadership pieces, white papers, and social media blogs. We also focus very heavily on portfolio management. One of the things you never see, but you are the beneficiary of. We see one of our most important roles as portfolio managers to provide stability of pricing and coverage through the years. Now, this doesn't mean our pricing is static. It means as the exposures and trends increase, we adjust our position and our pricing to ensure a profitable portfolio. This also means not jumping in and out of industries or professions that we write. It's about being a safe pair of hands in a class of business that is constantly changing. And finally, consistent capacity. We support you and your clients by providing consistent capacity through the cycles. We've been providing cyber capacity for 5 years now. We do this because, we can do this because we work with our Lloyd's partners to ensure they understand our business, where we want to bring the business, and what support is required from them to deliver on that strategy. Bringing our incident response and claims management process in-house is a classic example of that. In the last 2 years, we've had no change in security, no change in capabilities, and no change in capacities. I'm not sure too many cyber insurers can say that today. This allows us to consistently provide us and provide you with the solutions, support, and service that you expect from us. So I hope that gives you an understanding of how we like to innovate, but also how we deliver the solutions we do. You can get access to what we do via our updated website, which includes our commercial offerings, our latest new product, Personal Cyber. Don't forget to talk to your clients about the only standalone personal cyber product in the market. With COVID and working from home, businesses are seeing this as an employee benefit and adding it to their personal insurance suite. The website also has new marketing material, new Personal Cyber white paper, and our improved portal, which provides you with access to our personal and commercial offerings. For assistance on any cyber-related issues, please feel free to contact any of our growing Emergence underwriting team or our incident response team. We now have the largest cyber team in the country that is only focused on one thing, and that's cyber. They're all here to provide you with the technical support that you need when looking for cyber solutions from your clients. Never forget, as cyber specialists, all we do is cyber, nothing else. Our incident response team telephone number is also there, which is the same number for personal and commercial claims. The Emergence Incident Response Team is available 24/7 and manages the claims process to minimize the threat and save your clients time and money. Now, a tip for you. Put the hotline number 1300 799 562 and the email address claims@emergenceinsurance.com.au in your mobile phone in case your client rings outside of business hours and they need urgent support. That way, you've got the information you need at hand to make sure that we don't lose any time managing the incident. I said we were running a competition today. Firstly, congratulations to Chris Anasakakis of Omnisure Insurance Brokers in Sydney, who won our November 2020 webinar competition. Today, you're automatically in the draw to win one of 5 $50 gift vouchers for just tuning in today. We will advise the winner of the prize by email this Friday, the 26th of February. As I mentioned earlier, all attendees will be entitled to 1 CPD point. We will automatically send out the certificates of attendance to the email address you used to register for this event. For those attendees listening as a group, such as in a boardroom, please send a list of attendees now, including your full name and email address to info@emergenceinsurance.com.au so that we can issue the certificate of attendance to everybody. A number of you have posted questions, so let's deal with them. Troy, what have you got for us?
G'day, Jerry. All right, let's start. Maybe a silly question, but is the cloud safe? I have a lot of clients say when trying to sell cyber, I'm going to the cloud, and our IT people tell me it's safe and they don't need cyber insurance. Shane, you want to take that one?
Thanks, Troy. The answer to that question is yes, the cloud is safe. And the conversation that we should be having about going to the cloud is about how we do it with the appropriate level of planning and rigor and risk assurance around it, so that when you get there, it's not incorrectly configured or it's not missing security functionality, which is where you can land up in a few issues. For example, multi-factor authentication on an email environment in Office 365. That causes a lot of people issues, and they think that Office 365 is insecure, but it's not. You've just got to use the right level of security as you're going to the cloud.
Yeah, I think just to put that in context, the move to cloud is phenomenal. If you look at Amazon or Microsoft filings, the amount of growth in their cloud businesses are unbelievable. Amazon are growing about 35 to 45% per quarter in their AWS cloud solution. So it is definitely where all the data is going.
And yes, we're going to make this presentation available like we do all the time. It'll also go on our YouTube channel as well once Jerry does the production. Jerry, how does the NDB scheme identify the cause of attack? As in most instances, wouldn't human error be due to a malicious attack such as spam email?
So there's a number of things there, Troy. The human error issue can be caused by numerous things. For example, one of the claims that we dealt with last year in a medical center, a receptionist was given a USB stick and told to send it to a patient with medical records. The policy for the medical practice was that those USBs were sent in secure registered mail. That employee got the USB at 5 to 5. She wanted to get out that door by 5, so she ignored the policies and procedures and just whacked it in an envelope, sent it out, And Australia Post managed to lose the USB because the envelope was fairly flimsy, and by the time the letter got to the patient, there was no USB, and that was a notifiable breach to the OAIC. So you can have situations that are not malicious. Other examples of that is sending emails to the wrong people, not BCCing various people to emails where you're now sharing people's personal information that didn't ask for that information to be shared.
A question here from Carl. Do we pay these people? So when you say pay these people, I'm assuming that you're talking about ransomware here. We do. We pay ransoms. We've paid quite a few of them. Ransomware continues to be an issue, and a lot of the claims that we've been getting over the last few months. We actually had a team meeting this morning, and we're talking to our internal incident response team, but they're coming in thick and fast. Look, I think that the term that Darren used is that they've pivoted now, where back in the day that used to just lock the data and ask for a ransom, whereas now they're taking the data. We even responded to an incident, I think it was one of our claims examples last quarter, where they had a ransomware payment of $200,000 US. And when we started negotiating with them, they actually told us not to bother. They know that that the client had cyber insurance, and they also knew the turnover of the business and said, you can very much afford this, so cut the crap and just pay it. So hopefully that answers your question, Carl. With the ongoing growth of crypto, would a crypto wallet be stolen, count as a crime or a cyber attack? Yeah, Darren, you there?
Yeah, I got the hard question. It's an interesting one. Probably both, to be honest. It depends on the type of crypto wallet and the method by which it was taken. We see a lot of people are using the physical hardware devices for their crypto wallets because they're very conscious of not having something online that could be taken, in which case it's going to be a standard crime that you'd be reporting to the police. But if for some reason you have you've got a wallet which is an application or on a phone or something else, and someone has managed to get into that and then actually get your usernames, passwords, and potentially second factor, if you've got that on there, it would be a cyber crime because of what it was. In Australia, crypto assets, bitcoins, are just considered assets according to the ATO, so they've got the same value as any other asset. Funny enough, it's one of the harder things to take. There are not many Bitcoin or other coin wallets out there that don't have quite a level of security around them. So I actually haven't seen it happen, other than I have seen some people steal the wallet codes to reset them, whereas people have written them down on a piece of paper and put them in their safe for safekeeping, and then someone has found it, worked out what it was, and then took the account that way.
Excellent. Darren, in some of the ransoms that you've seen, what's been the average quantum?
More recently, it's been in the millions. In the SME market, where the attackers have done a little bit of due diligence on their own, it's anywhere from the $50,000 to about $500,000 mark, and it just depends on where that is. And I have seen in those instances where a smaller business that could never afford a large ransom, they've actually negotiated down to something that is possibly affordable into the sort of $50,000, $60,000 mark. In the enterprise world, where we're talking about larger businesses that are possibly listed, it's anywhere from a small ransom of about $2 million up to the tens of millions. We had one client who was very unfortunate. Their ransom was only $2 million. I say only $2 million, but because of the way it ran through their network, it kept running over and over again, and kept overriding the same areas more than once. So they ended up having to, if they wanted to get their data back from their file server, pay the ransom 6 times. So it was actually $12 million. And when talking to the attackers, they just couldn't understand what had happened. And they said, no, just, you give us the key and you pay the money and we'll give you the key back. And they elected to not pay that. But as I said in the presentation recently, we've seen $7.5 million in Monero paid to a Russian organised crime group for a ransom.
Thank you. One last question before we run out, and we've got some other questions, but we'll take care of them and we'll email those out to everyone. It was around personal cyber. Is this for everyday family households or for partner operations? Personal cyber is for the family household. It's not for an individual. It's for the family, the kids, the mum and dad that live in that household. If it's an individual living by themselves, it will cover them. But essentially, it's to cover the family household. And with that, Jerry, over to you.
Thank you, Troy. So before we sign off today, I'll leave you with a thought for the day. Even the criminals are pivoting. I promised you we would finish this webinar on 60 minutes. We're now running at 61 minutes, so it's time for me to sign off. On behalf of Emergence, I'd like to thank you all for taking the time to join our webinar today. We know you've got many demands on your time. I hope you've got a greater understanding of the latest cyber threat landscape and Emergence capabilities to deliver appropriate solutions to your clients. Some of you asked, how can you get a certificate of attendance again? The email address is info@emergenceinsurance.com.au. If you need access to the Emergence portal or you need your password reset, that's the same email. For your information, all our previous webinars are also available anytime on YouTube. Just search for Emergence Insurance on YouTube and you will find them all there. You can keep up to date with our social media posts by subscribing to Emergence Insurance on LinkedIn. We will also send you a short survey to gain your feedback on today's webinar and to get your thoughts on what cyber-related topics you would like to see in future webinars. We would really appreciate if you could complete the survey in the next few days. We will use your feedback to plan our webinar series for the rest of the day, for the rest of the year. The next webinar in our series will be in May, so keep an eye out for that. We will send invites out a few weeks beforehand. Before I go, I'd like to thank Darren and Shane for your time and your insights today. Very interesting, very valuable, and we very much appreciate that. This is the official end of the webinar. Thank you and enjoy the rest of your day.